Wow, 38.
You can welcome everybody.
Okay. Can I start now?
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to our second annual, or our second webinar. My name is Ike Balmaceda, who, for those who don't know me, I am the incoming president for the next 2 years for SAGE. So again, welcome. What I'd like to do, if you can, Marissa, switch to slide 2. I'd like to thank our annual sponsors. At the platinum level, we have High Ridge Costa, All Valley Washer Service, and Rancho Mission Viejo. At our gold level, we have HPI Architecture and silver KTGY. And in the bronze, as you could see, we have a lot of our trades and our consultants, firms, etc. So again, thank you. Without your sponsorship, this wouldn't be possible. Just briefly, what I'd like to do is welcome our sponsors for today's event, W.E. O'Neill, CW Driver, Vols Company, and Lutron. With that, I'd like to introduce to you Ronnie Jundi. And hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Ronnie, who's going to speak briefly about their company. And then we'll move on to the webinar. Ronnie, take it.
Well, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I want to thank the Council on SAGE for giving us an opportunity to introduce ourselves. We're honored to be the presenting sponsor for today's event and to continue supporting the senior living community in any way we can. So I'm Raniel Jindi. I'm responsible for business development at W.E. O'Neill here in California. For those that don't know, W.E. O'Neill is a nationally ranked builder. We were established in 1925 in Chicago and eventually moved out to California in 1985. So we currently have offices in Chicago, Nashville, Denver, Phoenix, Tucson, and 5 here in California, including our California headquarters, which is in El Segundo. The other offices we have are in regions that we do a lot of work in, such as Orange County, Inland Empire, San Fernando Valley, and San Diego. So we're a very diverse general contractor working on a lot of sectors, including senior living, of course, multifamily, retail, office, hospitality, and education. So W.E. O'Neill Construction has been building senior living facilities throughout all our regions for decades. We have extensive experience in both ground up and renovation projects, and I've worked with many different developers and operators, including our panelists today. Our product types include independent living, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, and even complete CCRCs. So why we do it? Well, we truly believe in building long-term relationships by partnering with our clients and our industry partners. We like to make it our priority to assist senior living owners, administrators, and operators in transforming their vision into a newly built facility or campus. So we essentially are looking to help create communities for our residents to love and to be comfortable. So given our experience in residential building as a whole, we truly understand what it takes to put heads on beds. As we've been building products for different needs and generational groups for many years, there are a lot of benefits to creating intergenerational communities. And so I'm very excited to hear our discussion today. Anyway, thank you again. I look forward to reconnecting with a lot of you soon.
Thank you, Ronnie. I'd like to introduce to you Marissa. Marissa will be today's moderator. Melissa comes from HPI Architecture. She is the business development director, and she's been very actively involved with the senior housing, senior living component of the firm. Marissa's been very instrumental in, she is our acting vice president as well. She says she's my right-hand gal here. And she's put a great webinar together, and I'm very excited to hear what today's event on intergenerational communities. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Marissa.
Thanks, Ike. Well, and I'm going to bring up or introduce our speakers shortly, but just one quick note about how this program came together. I've had a very personal interest in intergenerational dynamics, and I think it stems from growing up with my parents and grandparents all in one household for my whole life, well, at least through high school. So for me, that's always been the norm. And now that I'm working in the senior living world, I hear this statement very often as it pertains to how frequently residents or prospective residents say, I don't want to live with a bunch of old people. So, I mean, this is why this is so interesting. I wanted to explore some of the different ways senior housing is being developed with the intention of mixing different generations and very intentional interactions across those different ages. And so that brings us to our speakers today. We have Patricia Will. Patricia co-founded Belmont Village Senior Living in 1997 as a fully integrated owner, developer, and operator of high-quality senior housing. They're known for purpose-built developments, best-in-class hospitality, first-rate care, and unique partnerships with top universities and institutions. Belmont has been a market leader for senior living in California for nearly 20 years, and they've pioneered intergenerational programming and lifelong learning through 2 unique university partnerships, which we'll hear more about today. Patricia currently serves on the boards for USC Davis School of Gerontology and the UCLA Center for Longevity. We also have Bill Pettit, the President and Chief Operating Officer of RD Meryl Company, which includes Meryl Gardens and Pillar Properties. Meryl Gardens is one of the most respected assisted living operators in the country with 70 communities in 20 states. And Pillar is an award-winning developer, owner, and operator of multifamily housing with 1,700 units in operation and the developer for all new Meryl Gardens communities. Bill serves on the Argentum Board of Directors, and he is past chairman of executive board for ASHA, American Senior Housing Association. And finally, we have Dr. Dilip Jesti, a renowned neuropsychiatrist who studies healthy aging, schizophrenia, and positive psychiatry. He's the Senior Associate Dean for Healthy Aging and a Distinguished Professor of Psychiatry and Neurosciences at University of California, San Diego. Dr. Jesti started the geriatric psychiatry program from scratch at UCSD, which today is one of the largest geriatric psychiatry divisions in the world. He's published 14 books, including his most recent book entitled Wiser. Highly recommend if you want to know the secrets of wisdom. Order it on Amazon. Dr. Jesti's also published over 725 articles in peer-reviewed journals and 160 book chapters. He is past president of the American Psychiatric Association, American Association for Geriatric Psychiatry, the West Coast College of Biological Psychiatry, and founding president of the International College of Geriatric Psychoneuropharmacology. He is a TED-Med speaker and currently editor-in-chief of International Psychogeriatrics. So with that, I'd like to allow Dr. Jesti to share your screen. We'll hear a brief presentation from you today, followed by a discussion with all 3 of our esteemed speakers.
So first of all, good morning, and thank you, Ike and Marisa, for inviting me here to this wonderful session with Patricia and Bill. I'm really delighted. So I'm going to talk on wisdom and healthy aging, the importance of intergenerational activities and communities. Very simple question. What is aging? We often hear about anti-aging remedies as if aging is a disease. Well, aging is not a disease to be cured or prevented. Aging.
Oh, hang on, Dr. Jesse. I don't see you're not sharing the right screen.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, we'll try one more time.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it now. Perfect.
Okay. So this is my first slide. And then here, talking about what is aging, they said it's not a disease to be cured or prevented. Aging is a process. Aging is an active and ongoing life process, which doesn't begin at age 65. Aging begins at conception, and it is associated with a dynamic balance between growth and development on one side and degeneration on the other side. So there is some degeneration with aging, but there is also growth and development, even in older age. So we have been doing a study at the Stein Institute for Research on Aging at UC San Diego. Actually, I should mention that the study is called SAGE. The SAGE stands for Successful Aging Evaluation. So it is great to talk about SAGE study at the SAGE conference. This is a study of 1,500 people from the San Diego community, somewhat randomly selected from age 21 to 100 plus. And we wanted to find out what happens to people's physical age and mental well-being. Physical health, as one would expect, declines with age. So on the horizontal x-axis at the bottom, you can see the age from age 20 to 90 plus. And on the vertical axis is good functioning. So what you see is that in the 20s and 30s, the best physical functioning. So that's a fountain of youth, right? After that, the things start declining. So by the time people reach 90s, most people have diseases and disabilities. That's to be expected, not surprising. What about mental health, mental well-being? It goes exactly in the opposite direction. The fountain of youth, 20s and 30s, is also the fountain of depression, anxiety, stress, peer pressure. But the good news is that things start getting better progressively. It is not that the stress goes down. It is that we know how to handle the stress better and we become happier. And that was a surprise. How come people become happier with age despite declining physical health? And one may say that that may be occurring normally, but what happened during the recent COVID when older people are known to be at the highest risk of physical complications of COVID. They're at the highest risk of being hospitalized, being admitted to ICU, being on ventilator, and dying, right? What about the mental health of older people during COVID? There is a surprise. Older people handle COVID better than the younger ones. So we published a paper in JAMA that showed that actually the prevalence of psychopathology like depression, anxiety, PTSD was actually lower in older people, and there was more resilience in older people compared to the younger ones. And just one example of such a study. This was a survey of over 5,000 Americans done toward the end of the last year. They found that psychopathology like depression, anxiety, PTSD was present in 15% of adults over 65, but in 75% of adults between 18 and 24. Think about that. 5 times more psychopathology in the youngest people, youngest adults compared to the older people. So there is something that is happening with aging that actually makes people stronger psychologically. So one problem, of course, we have been facing recently is loneliness. With the social distancing, loneliness has worsened. What people don't realize, though, is that this is a problem going on for the last 20 years. There has been a pandemic of loneliness for the past couple of decades. It is called a grand challenge to the society, also called a silent killer, because loneliness increases the odds of mortality by 30%. It is as dangerous to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day and more dangerous than mild to moderate obesity. And look at the statistics. According to the US Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, 162,000 Americans die every year from loneliness. And this is not during the COVID year. I'm talking about the last 20 years this has been happening. And that's more than the number of deaths secondary to lung cancer or stroke. And it's not just a health problem. In the UK, the businesses found that they were losing billions of pounds because of loneliness of the workers. So the Prime Minister, Theresa May, appointed a new Minister of Loneliness. So why is loneliness so bad for health? Why does it increase mortality? Because loneliness increases the risk of several major diseases: heart disease, diabetes, obesity, major depression with suicide. The rates of suicide have increased 33% in the last 20 years. Opioid and alcohol use, deaths from opioid have increased sixfold in the last 20 years. Anxiety disorders and Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. So loneliness is a terrible problem. But there's good news. Our research in the last few years has very consistently shown that there may be an antidote for loneliness. That antidote is what we call wisdom. So this is one study. I'm showing you a study of 2,400 Americans across the adult lifespan. And so on the horizontal axis, you see wisdom scores. And on the vertical axis, you see loneliness scores. And so what you are seeing is that people who score high on wisdom, they are not lonely, and vice versa. Of course, the question then is, what is wisdom, right? Wisdom is a personality trait. It's, just like there is neuroticism, resilience, extroversion, these are traits. Wisdom is a trait, but it has multiple components. What are those components? The most important is empathy and compassion. Empathy means understanding somebody's emotions. Compassion means going beyond and helping somebody. Emotional regulation, control over emotions. Self-reflection, ability to look inwards and trying to understand yourself. Accepting uncertainty and diversity of perspectives. So, I may have strong values about something, but I can understand why somebody else may have different values. That doesn't mean that either of us is either evil or dumb. At the same time, we need to be decisive when needed. We can't be sitting on the fence all the time. And lastly, this is somewhat controversial component is spirituality, which is different from religiosity. Spirituality means being connected constantly to something or someone, whether you call that entity God, consciousness, nature, soul, doesn't matter. How do you measure wisdom? So we published a scale called San Diego Wisdom Scale, or SDWISE, or just a Thomas Wisdom Index. My psychologist colleague, Michael Thomas, is a wonderful psychologist and expert in developing scales. So this scale has 28 items. And by the way, all of you can take it. It's online. And each item is to be scored on a 1 to 5 scale. We have shown that it is reliable, valid. It has already been translated into several languages. Examples of the items. It is important that I understand the reasons for my actions. That means I have self-reflection. I'm trying to understand my own behavior. Another item is I have trouble thinking clearly when I'm upset. So that shows the lack of emotional regulation, that when I'm upset, my emotions overpower my rational thinking. So there are 28 items like that, and you just say whether you agree or disagree to what extent. So as Marisa mentioned, this is a book that we just published, Wiser. And so that talks about the science behind wisdom, as well as how you can test yourself and also become wiser. Coming to aging. So why do older people feel happier, as I showed in my slide? And why are they doing better in spite of COVID? That's because certain abilities improve with aging. Number of studies have shown that with aging, we become more empathic, compassionate, become more self-reflective. We have stronger control over our emotions. We favor positive emotions and memory and forget the negative ones. And finally, with aging comes experience, and that's why we make better experience-based decisions. So these are exactly all the components of wisdom. So we can see why wisdom may be increasing with age. Although, how can anything get better with age, right? I mean, this is, wisdom is like other personality traits. It is partly based in the brain. Because when I went to medical school, I was taught that the only thing that happened to brain with age is it shrinks. It loses neuron synapses. So how can it get better? Well, research in the last 30 years has shown clearly that in people who are active, that's a very important thing to stress, in people who are active physically, cognitively, mentally, and socially, there is greater recruitment and more efficient utilization of neuronal networks in the brain. There is formation of new synapses and even new neurons in some brain regions, even in old age, in people who are active. And how do we become more positive? That is because the parts of the brain that are involved in emotion, they are less activated with negative emotional stimuli, regret, or fear in older age. So in other words, as we age, if we keep ourselves active, the nature will help us become wiser, happier, and healthier. But we have to keep ourselves active. And how do we do that? That's where the importance of intergenerational activities comes into play. You know, these days people often talk about silver tsunami. The number of older people is increasing, and as if that's a disaster. That's so wrong. Actually, we are lucky that people are getting older and those numbers are increasing. Why? Because there is science behind it. There is something called grandmother hypothesis of wisdom. What does the grandmother hypothesis say? It says that when grandparents, especially grandmother, are involved in raising the grandchildren, those grandchildren and children, they live longer, they are happier, they are healthier, and they're more fertile. They produce more children than the grandparents did. So as we age, we cannot reproduce after menopause or andropause in men. Our physical health declines. But we help the younger generations live longer, be happier, healthier, and more fertile. And my colleagues at UCSD have shown there are something called grandparent genes. If you have them, you will not only live longer, but will have better functioning hearts and brains, so you can do the grandparenting better. A lot of literature really on the importance of intergenerational activities. This is one study in UK, 1,500 secondary school students between the ages of 11 and 16. And they found that when grandparents were involved in raising kids, those kids had fewer emotional problems when they grew older. They were more pro-social, they were more empathic, compassionate, they had fewer adjustment difficulties, and they did better than the kids in whose upbringing grandparents were not involved. And this is especially true among teenagers from single parent or step parent families, which are actually at the highest risk of developing behavior problem, right? And this is one study I cannot stress enough. This is a great study. This was a study called Experience Score. This was funded by the MacArthur Foundation. It was done at Johns Hopkins. What they did was they took some older retired volunteers, people over 65 who had retired from their job, and they divided them into two groups randomly, okay? One group was asked to spend at least 15 hours a week helping kids in a public elementary school for 1 year, okay? The other group didn't have to do that. What happened after 1 year of this, some people spending time in the school? The kids, they did very well. Their grades went through the roof and they were very happy. Not a surprise. what happened to the older people, those who did this? Their mental health improved, physical health improved. Most importantly, their biomarkers in the blood and urine, which reflect stress level and aging, improved. And this is the most remarkable finding. The volume of the hippocampus on brain MRI was larger in the older people who helped the kids compared to the older people who didn't. And that doesn't mean the hippocampus grew. What it meant, it did not decline in these people. So there are actually now some international campaigns that are going on along these lines, which include intergenerational activities. One is the WHO Global Network of Age-Friendly Cities and Communities. AARP helps with that. And I'm happy to say that San Diego City is officially involved in this Age-Friendly Communities campaign. And there is a new campaign that started in Europe recently called Compassionate Communities. And that is now beginning to spread through the US. And this is my last slide. So in summary, wisdom and compassion is a very important part of wisdom. As I said, they should be considered as antidotes to loneliness. As I showed in a slide earlier, when people do well on wisdom, they are not lonely and vice versa. Intergenerational activities are beneficial for all the generations involved. And that's why we need intergenerational communities at all levels. So thank you for your attention, and I'm sure there'll be time for questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jesty. I'm sure these were incredible insights. I'm sure we barely scratched the surface of the research from you and your team at UCSD. But yes, that was a great mention. If you have questions throughout this discussion, please use the Q&A feature, and we will address questions closer to the end of the program. But now we get to our conversation part, and prepping for this conversation was fun, and I'm curious what will come up today. But I think I'd like to start with Patricia and Bill. I sort of would love to hear a little bit of background on your purpose and your vision. Maybe we'll start purpose and vision for Belmont Village. Patricia, if you'd like to start. Oh, but unmute.
Sorry. So from the very beginning, our purpose and vision was to change the paradigm of what it means to live in a seniors housing community. What I mean by that is that we've always seen a need for great real estate and surroundings, world-class hospitality, an underbelly of care, and yes, to the maximum extent possible, intergenerational activity that goes beyond what I saw a lot of when I entered the industry roughly 25 years ago, which was little children being paraded into communities to entertain the seniors, as opposed to engaging the seniors in sharing their capabilities, their talents, and their wisdom with multiple generations. So set out on that and have had the privilege of working it for the last 25 years, and I'll talk about that in a bit.
Nice. Bill, do you want to share a little bit about the vision behind how Meryl Gardens came together?
Sure. I started Meryl Gardens 29 years ago now. And not surprisingly, because Patricia and I have known each other for quite a few years, there are a lot of similarities really between how Meryl Gardens has approached senior housing and what Patricia just described. I like to think of it as an evolutionary awakening on our part. And when we first entered the industry, we acquired and developed properties, and they were pretty typical for that period of time. They were 3 to 5 acre parcels outside of town. And as we looked at our business in the early years, we realized we were spending a fair amount of time taking our seniors from the community we were operating in and owned out into intergenerational environments, and we were busing them from the community into these environments. And that didn't feel right, because from the start, our vision has always been at Meryl Gardens that when you came to Meryl Gardens, there were no surprises, there were no changes. You got to pick your home. You operated in an environment of no rules, similar to how you lived at home. And we were in the process of creating these islands of old age. So really about 15, 16 years ago, we really reversed the paradigm, as Patricia described it. And we began with a project that we weren't sure was going to work. And we engaged both our pillar team, which does multifamily. We engaged our Meryl Gardens team, which does senior housing. And we put together a very cool project, which has been the foundation for what we do today intergenerationally, where we had both non-age restricted people, from students to, because it's adjacent to the University of Washington, to young professionals, and even a few older individuals like me as well, living in a multifamily project across a courtyard from a typical Meryl Gardens community of senior housing, which is independent living, assisted living, and memory care. And we threw in 22,000 square feet of retail as part of that project. And that took off. What was fascinating was it took off in 2009, right in the heart of the recession, and it's been full ever since. And and we began with that project to focus on developing future intergenerational projects, which has been the core of our development since then.
Hey, you touched on something really specific there about, I guess, what drives this interaction. So I guess as you approach a new development for a senior living community, what would be one single driving factor or a few of the driving factors that allows you to create that intergenerational dynamic?
Well, what we seek out are sites which have high walkability scores. In a typical sense. So locations, whether we're building multifamily and seniors together, as we have in a number of developments since that first project, or whether we're merely siting a senior project, we want them sited in a way where when a senior comes to live with us, they have their own environment they manage inside the building. But when they walk outside the front door, they're there among all generations, from young children to young adults to adult children in that environment. And they're engaging as they have their whole life, whether it's walking to a Starbucks or whether it's going out for dinner on Thursday nights. They're there in the midst of a very familiar environment that they had structured as young adults, and as their migration occurred to senior status. And to us, that's what begins to define a great site for Meryl Gardens. It's that ability to integrate fully with all generations.
Patricia, what role did site selection play as you go to create this process or this dynamic?
Well, the best example I can provide is the ideal, and we kind of work from there. Back in 2012-13, we were approached for the second time by the regents of the University of California, and specifically the retirees and emeriti, to create a seniors housing community with, if not adjacency, very close to campus, where priority entrance would be given to former constituents. We did our first one with UCLA about a mile from campus, and then 12 or 13, we were selected to do a second one on Berkeley land at UC Berkeley. All of the ingredients that Bill just described were there inherently in steroids. The community is built adjacent to graduate student housing. Right behind it is a university-sponsored preschool and an athletic center, including a ball field for kids. And it's in a mixed use context. So we've got the Starbucks, the restaurant, the Sprouts, the grocery store. What you can do in that kind of environment is engage not just the university students with the former professors who largely are who live in the building, but also every generation. So what has become the norm, even via Zoom during COVID-19, but obviously other times, is not only the free exchange between the university graduate students who live right behind us and our seniors housing building, but teaching STEM by our seniors to high school students. Our preschoolers learn to read from our seniors. Our 93-year-olds go to their labs at the university and still mentor graduate students. That kind of interchange, granted, all of these people start with a pretty high IQ, but that if that doesn't expand the part of the hippocampus that Dr. Jesty was describing, I don't know what does, and also gives a richness to the kids at every generational level. We are replicating that in other places. We're about to do our second project in LA in affiliation with UCLA because the first one is so oversubscribed. And I think, and again, we will have a preschool adjacent to the project. So it's not just the older people who can gain, but also the little kids, but not just by entertaining the seniors, it's the seniors who are teaching them.
Nice, like the encore career is what I hear, is getting to that next phase. And there's a lot of times older adults find their new life, a new entrepreneurship, or in this case, just another way to contribute all their wisdom. And so allowing that to happen. But there's another example, Patricia, you shared in Chicago, which is, so you have this affiliation with the university and sort of, I know, Bill, you have an affiliation with University of Washington, but in the case of Chicago, how was that different in terms of how that partnership came together?
Okay, so basically we don't have a formal affiliation with DePaul. The situation in Chicago, and by the way, I have to give a shout out to O'Neill because they built the Chicago building, Driver built the first UCLA building, and O'Neill built the Berkeley building. So Ronnie, thank you for making great buildings. But I have to say that, again, we're in a mixed use, 6-acre development with multifamily market rate, largely populated by 30-somethings and 20-somethings. Condos, market rate condos that are populated by, and we're all attached, by people that are a little older that can afford to buy condos. And we're right down, retail and restaurant, and we're right down the street from DePaul University, which has, and a wonderful, iconic church with a fabulous preschool. So getting together with DePaul and looking at all of the ways in which we can engage without a formal affiliation at the genesis of the project. So we were formally affiliated with the multifamily retail and restaurant. We all share loading docks and common facilities. And that enables exchange among, the kind of like Bill described. Everyone collides at the Starbucks, or when it's not COVID-19, on our outdoor patios. But the idea of siting close to a university that's very walkable and down the street opens up every faculty of theirs for every kind of sharing that you can imagine. And now that we're beginning to open up again, our seniors will revel in that.
Nice. So actually, I'd like to hear some examples. And Dr. Jesty, I wonder if you can expand or share some examples how older adults can benefit from this intentional interaction, and conversely, how students at the college level can benefit from that intentional interaction with seniors. Unmute one.
Yeah, thank you, Marisa. Yes, at UC San Diego's Center for Elderly Aging, we have been doing several projects that bring together the UCSD students with people living in the senior housing communities. I want to give you one example that is called design competition. What we did was we took some engineering students and we took them to one particular relatively large retirement community. And they were asked to form teams. So each team had, say, 5-6 older people and a couple of engineering students. And that to work together over a period of a year. And the older people had to come up with ideas about things that were still unmet. They had something need and for which there was no clear solution. And then the engineering students had to work with them to find a solution. I'll give you an example. When you get up in the middle of the night, it's dark, and one is likely to fall. You can't switch on the light, because if you switch on the light, then you'll be wide awake. You can't go back to sleep. What do you do? So one team came up with this idea of what they call lighted carpet. So what you do is when you get out of the bed, you first put your foot on the carpet. Immediately that portion of the carpet lights up. It's a small portion. So that way you're not woken up, and yet you take the next step, that portion lights up, and that continues. And that's just a brilliant invention, wasn't it? So what we did was, then at the end of the year, all of the students, all of the older people, they came together and we asked them, and they presented their projects. And then we asked the audience to choose number 1, number 2, number 3 of those. And the credit went to the whole team. So the older people were co-inventors. They were co-entrepreneurs with the younger students. And they both really came to respect each other so much. The older people really found these engineering students, they're brilliant, and they know so much about technology, a lot of energy. On the other hand, the students actually appreciated and admired the older people's, their thought and how quickly they actually learned technology, how wise advice they gave, in addition to all the compassion, empathy, emotional regulation, other components of wisdom. So it was a great project. And that's just one example of how we can have projects like that that can help both the students and the older people.
Yes, that one shows how both cohorts have really mutually benefited out of that. That's great. And I want that carpet. So Patricia, what are some of the outcomes you've seen in terms of the successful integration between college students and residents of Belmont Village?
I think that the limitation for us has been time and not imagination, because there are so many examples that I can cite for you. One of my favorites is a program that we initiated, or our residents initiated with Berkeley, called Conversations in Art. And it's something that we've now taken to college students elsewhere in the country, where the Fine Arts Department nominates students who have a juried exhibition of their art, judged by our residents, but they also describe what gave rise to the emotions in the art. The stories that have come out of that and the bonding between residents guiding undergraduate and graduate students that are ongoing relationships are, just kind of give me chills. We've taken that program on the road and believe that you don't have to have a formal affiliation with professors dominating the residency of your building to accomplish the same thing. it's a mere example of the many, many different ways that you can engage generations in meaningful ways as opposed to trivial ones.
That's beautiful. And I think it shows how when you have the venue or the medium for which the residents to contribute, they have so much to contribute. We only need to bring them together to allow that to happen. Bill, what have you seen in collaborations between these two age groups at Meryl Gardens?
Actually, I think what we've seen is both what I would call active and passive integration between the generations. On the active side, this project that I mentioned, which is adjacent to the University of Washington, in the multifamily side, we had a significant number of both graduate students and undergraduate students living with us. And we would see and have seen, it's continued, some of those students come into our Meryl Gardens dining room because we open at 7 in the morning and close at 7:30 at night. So they come in after classes, before studying, and or before evening classes, and they would eat in our dining rooms because we serve good food. It's affordable, and they had a host of people to talk to, and so as a result, we saw that kind of active draw from surrounding food and nutrition, bringing the generations together. We also have found that our happy hours with affordable wine and beer for our seniors in our communities was also a big draw for a lot of the students that would come in and enjoy spending some time with the seniors. That all changed when a really cool restaurant opened up in our retail area, and then the seniors and the students all went to the restaurant and actually kind of put a dent in our happy hours at that point. But then we also saw actually some of our seniors who were very active physically. They would go across the courtyard to our multifamily building, which had a much more robust fitness area with equipment and also young people exercising at the same time, and they would be integrating in the multifamily building with students. Beyond that, though, I'd be curious on Dr. Jesty's view on this. We also place a premium on what I call passive integration as a tool to avoid and deal with loneliness in our buildings. And so our buildings are designed with open sight lines, either glass or purely open between common areas. So in a lot of areas in our building, you can be sitting in one area, say dining, and have open sight lines to full activity in the activity rooms that we may have. But that also applies, I think, to this courtyard or to the streetscape, depending on where we are, with the seniors being able to feel and see that kind of association they still maintain in their environment with other generations, just as they enjoyed when they were living more independently at home. So we really look to create environments which do both facilitate active integration as well as facilitate that kind of passive association and sightlines with all generations.
Yeah, Dr. Jesty, do you have any thoughts about that?
This is actually a point very well made, and there's no question about that. That this is not just sort of effect on mental health; it is actually effect on body, the biology, including the brain, and the importance of learning new things, for example, has been shown so well. We all know that physical activities are good for our health, right? Mental and social activities are equally important. There have been studies in which people learn something new. And for example, some people who are preparing for an exam and they did their MRI before and after. And so after 3 months of learning, the researchers found there's increase in the gray matter of specific part of the brain that was involved in that learning. It's really remarkable. And this has been shown obviously in younger people, but also in older people. When you talk about things like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, take out the physical aspect. Just if you look at only the mental aspect, those have a biological effect. Again, studies show that learning of any kind is really useful in terms of reducing the inflammation in the body, increasing the integrity of the white matter in the brain, and so on and so forth. So this is not feel-good TV science, hardcore science that shows that learning is helpful for the brain and the body. And of course, one thing is that this learning should be fun learning. It should not be forced learning where it becomes too stressful. At the same time, there should be some challenge, because if there is no challenge, life is boring, right? So there should be challenge, but still fun. And that is that combination that is critical for the growth and development of brain, even in old age.
Well, that's good news for me, because I consider myself a lifelong student. So I think there's too many things I want to learn and not enough time. So, but that's really perfect segue, because I wanted to hear from Patricia and Bill so we heard about sort of your siting and your shared amenities, but programming as it relates to continuous learning, lifelong learning. What are some of the ways that this has been organized in your communities?
I'm happy to address that first, because I think that that's terrifically important, and it's not just a matter of assuring interesting things going on with speakers that come into the community. It's really a deliberate effort to facilitate learning with great institutions. In much of California, all of Southern California, we've been now for probably 15 years running programs with Ochsner's lifelong learning associated with various universities. And we have seniors teaching in those programs who live with us, and we have seniors engaged in learning in those programs, many of which actually are taught or were taught except for during COVID, in common areas in our buildings. We have libraries where our seniors are the authors and open up to teach others, and where they in turn engage either by going to proximate campuses or by continuing to learn online. The Longevity Center at UCLA has a multiplicity of programs, and a wonderful program where seniors can sign up at rock bottom rates to take courses with students, undergraduate and graduate courses. And we've got seniors doing all manner of that. And you can do it now virtually as well as in person when that happens again. So the idea here is, again, not to trivialize the possibilities, but to continue the richness that we were all able to experience in our younger years to promote lifelong learning.
Nice. Bill?
Our program is not quite as developed as Patricia's on the association with universities. We employ that in locations where it's convenient and can be facilitated. Our programs at Meryl Gardens are built around enriching a senior's life through what I call the 5 pillars, where we basically are enablers. We make it easy to both facilitate and to engage. And that's, they're the basics of nutrition, making sure that they're eating right. They're the basics of fitness, where we create an environment where they engage both in the social side of the fitness programs that we have, but also in the strength building and maintenance of that strength. We also, frankly, focus a lot on socialization as the key. So many of our seniors come to us from living isolated at home as they have aged. They come to us after loss of a spouse. They come to us after a scare on the healthcare side, whether it's a major fall or an illness. And our teams, our environment really focuses on the whole, not only care if and when they need it, but intellectual stimulation as part of their daily routine. And it's that variety, that challenge, that creates this social mix that goes after what Dr. Jesse spent some of his time talking about. Is our goal is to eliminate loneliness on the part of any senior living with us, and through that, because that's the most powerful impact on them. That through our environment, they not only have the visual, the active, and the passive side of it, but they have an environment with a whole team of Meryl team members focused on helping them make the connections that really ensures that they will no longer be lonely. And you know, any senior can tell you, because I'm a senior now. I don't know how old I am. I don't even know or think that I look old until I look in a mirror or I look at a Zoom call, and then I realize how old I am. Well, I want that same kind of young mentality in every Meryl Gardens senior, or every senior that comes to a Meryl Gardens community. I want them to feel that engagement, not to worry about what they look like, but care more about how they're living their life. And so we work hard. We don't have the ability to get that university connection to every building we live in, but we want to make sure that they are stimulated, they are engaged socially, and they come to their later years loving it. And I mean, Patricia's had the same thing I have. I am sure that number of adult children that have come to us and said, thank you for restoring the relationship with my parents. We no longer just talk about how they're feeling. We talk about meaningful, fun family remembrances and what they're doing. And from the senior themselves has come to us from living alone saying, man, I should have come a long time ago, but I'm happy I'm here. So.
Well, that's perfect. I think as we're wrapping up, that's a perfect segue to hear from each of you, and we'll start with Bill. But what is our call, or what your big takeaway to share with the whole industry, with our senior living world? What would you say?
I think it's. I think that from the standpoint of the senior themselves, that I think you put it at the start, Marissa, that you're just entering a whole new exciting phase of life, and there is no reason to withdraw from that. You want to engage it, embrace it, and frankly, enjoy your years. And so much of that is created by an environment where they're not leaving their home to walk into what I continue to call an island of old age. They are just moving from one house to another as they have through all their years. It's up to us as developers, architects, designers, and operators to really create that environment for them where they're not making concessions from how they lived. They're stepping into a much more interesting environment than sitting at home. And so that's that's what we're focused on as a message. Everybody wants to believe they'll be Betty White when they age, but reality is not everybody has Betty White's energy and enthusiasm, and it's up to us from design to operations to give them that enthusiasm back.
Well, Patricia?
Here's what I would say. I think that by and large today, we have been embracing a generation of seniors who, for starters, were reluctant participants and basically didn't understand necessarily what they were getting themselves into, and were, to a large degree, coming to our communities at the behest of their adult children. And once they experience the richness on the inside, the mitigants to loneliness, the ability to share their talents and continue their pursuits, they say, why did I wait and not do this sooner? I think we're on the verge of a bit of a paradigm shift where we're about to see in the generations coming, people who will say, let's go. I loved living in the frat house. I loved living in the dorm, or the commune. And I'm not going to sit home alone and be passive, even if I'm a great reader, and wait for the occasional visit where I can't drive. So that's a really exciting moment for us. And I think that all the elements are there. And certainly this generation is taking advantage of them in communities like Bill's and ours. But I think we're about to see all that go on steroids. And I can tell you that that's why, fast forward, I want to live in one of these communities. I want to be home by myself, or even by myself with my husband. He's a nice guy, but there's so much.
And Dr. Jesse, what words of wisdom would you leave us with today?
Well, this really has been an exciting session, and thank you, Patricia and Bill. I think I see the main problem for the society is the ageism, which has been there, and especially I think more in the modern Western societies. And the expectation that older people are a burden on the society. As I said, this is called silver tsunami. The number of older people is increasing. And the problem is, it is wrong that older people are necessary for younger people's survival and thriving from an evolutionary perspective. As I said, the grandmother hypothesis of wisdom. Number of studies in science clearly show that older people are necessary for the survival of the society. And that needs, so I say that it's not a silver tsunami, it's a golden wave of happy, wise older people who are there to help the younger generation. And there is no reason to have sort of think about a generational war. Sometimes, often in politics, you say, if you spend money on older people, you don't have enough money for children. That's wrong. I mean, really, we should never think along those lines. It's one society, including both older and younger people, and older people are, they said, and we older people themselves actually need to agree with that and incorporate that. Sometimes older people themselves actually accept the fact that they're a burden on the society. They are not. They're actually, the society is lucky to have them. And one other thing is that, as Bill said, it doesn't matter how old you chronologically are or how old you look. An important thing is how old you feel. That's under your control. And again, scientific studies have shown that people who feel younger do better. Their bodies function at a younger level than those of people who feel old. So that's under our control. So we should feel young and do the things that are appropriate. I mean, my favorite is the serenity prayer, that we have to accept the serenity to accept the thing that we cannot change, but we must have courage to change the things we can and wisdom to know the difference. There's lots of ways in which older people are critical for the younger generations. And I just hope that these intergenerational communities help spread that message further. So thank you.
I agree. Oh, wonderful. Well, we have one question that I'm going to pass along from the audience before we close. I think we'll only have time for one question. So I'll read this out. In melding the goal on active integration with possible privacy needs, where in the built environment do you recommend the physiotherapy equipment, such as the spas for massage services or yoga studios? Where would you recommend this be placed? And this is from Corey Skurlock.
So, Corey, where we place them are, we have a section in each, an area of each building where we have our fitness areas, and we have separate rooms associated with the fitness area that are there for visiting therapists and or doctor's visits in that context. And so we tend to have a section of our fitness area which is more private from that standpoint, and that's where we provide for that kind of interaction.
Oh, Patricia, were you going to say? Unmute, Patricia.
So we have a Center for Life Enhancement that is essentially a gym-like facility with gym equipment, and it's manned at all times by a certified PT. We have private sessions when the facility is closed to other people. And we have group sessions. We also use outdoors a lot now for other kinds of physical activity. And we also find that the PTs who work in our buildings do a lot of therapies with seniors in their apartments. So for specialized equipment, we actually have it located in our gyms. In an attractive way. And, but we also find, so the larger pieces, but we also find that a lot of activity takes place in the apartment or even the hallway.
Wonderful. Thank you, Corey. I hope that answers your question. And I want to just thank the three of you for sharing so much of your insight and experience today. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you. Ike, welcome you back. Oh.
Yes, thank you. And I just wanted to echo that from Marissa. Thank you, Bill, Patricia, Dr. Jesty. This has been a wonderful, informative, and very educational session. So thank you very much. So before we close, I just wanted to have everyone, the attendees out there, know that save the date. We have another upcoming program next month, April 22nd, PMB and the Integrated Wellness Model for Senior Living. So again, thank you very much. This has been wonderful. Have a great week ahead or ending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, take care.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.